Zeon ran while asking if whatever was attacking the city was the collector. Kaylee immediately nodded in confirmation. Zeon was surprised, not understanding who they were to be so terrifying. Kaylee said they were a notoriously brutal gang that had been rapidly expanding its power recently. They were the Black Shark Pirate Gang, led by a crazed awakener of rank D accompanied by a string of dangerous subordinates. Kaylee ground her teeth in hatred. They not only looted, they were murderers who enjoyed killing. Zeon still couldn't believe it. Could someone only rank D really be that scary? The two of them quickly ran up to a large, intricately carved door. Kaylee hurriedly shoved the door open and rushed in, then called out in alarm, "Grandfather!" Inside, Dordan sat calmly on the sofa, while Pabilsa stood waiting with a serious expression. Kaylee worriedly suggested they move the giant turtle Archelon immediately. Otherwise, the raiders would catch up quickly. Pabilsa clenched his fists and affirmed that now the only option was to fight. There was no more time to run. Kaylee was about to go gather the warriors when a cold voice rang out, stopping her. Dordan put his feet on the table and said there was no need to call anyone. He and Zeon would handle it. Kaylee stood there puzzled, completely not understanding what was happening. Meanwhile, the silver-haired old man leisurely drank his tea as if nothing serious was going on. Suddenly, Dordan loudly called Zeon's name. He pointed at Zeon and handed the task of dealing with the raiders to him. Zeon was stunned, not understanding why it was him. Dordan forced Zeon to go out and fight because he had just gifted him a precious piece of equipment. And now it was time for Zeon to repay him for that. Zeon panicked, saying how could he possibly defeat a rank D? Worry showed clearly on Zeon's face at this unreasonable demand. Dordan looked straight into his eyes and coldly asked, "Are you scared now?" Zeon fell silent, as if the question had struck his pride. He always wanted to prove he was strong in front of Dordan. Finally, he quietly stepped outside, a solitary figure amid the swirling sandstorm. Zeon gritted his teeth in anger, silently cursing Dordan as a lunatic. He knew he'd fallen for a simple but extremely effective taunt. That old man was truly devious. Zeon took a deep breath to calm himself, because he had no more time to dwell on it. The grains of sand around him began to whirl more violently. Zeon closed his eyes, trying to concentrate all his spirit to sense the flow of mana moving. There were only about 5 minutes before the enemy arrived. He had to come up with a plan right then. Zeon's gaze stopped on the black glove on his right hand, the weapon that helped him amplify sand magic. His goal was to defeat an awakener, someone far stronger than him at the moment. On the turtle's back, Pabilsa anxiously asked Dordan if doing this was really okay. Letting Zeon fight alone was too dangerous, because Zeon was only an E-rank hunter. Dordan replied coldly, if he lost, he'd die. It's that simple. To him, this was the most practical training. Pabilsa sighed and said Dordan was always too extreme. Even a tiger can be killed by a pack of dogs when it's still young. The old man looked toward the horizon, where the enemy was charging in at terrifying speed. Then he shouted down to Zeon as a reminder, "Remember this, kid." His voice echoed across the white sands. Pabilsa's words were not spared, but they seemed to have angered Zeon. He bowed his head, clenched his fists, and steeled himself for the life-or-death battle about to begin. At the same time, the pirate gang had arrived. Gane led the formation, followed by a string of seasoned assassins riding monstrous beasts. The bandaged face of Gane curled into a slight sneer, revealing a terrifying cruelty. A blood-red killing intent radiated around him as Gane ordered that the hands and feet of those on the ship be chopped off and taken as food. "Attack!" he roared, inciting his excited subordinates, eager to display their power and watch the city's people tremble. The whole gang charged forward on their savage mounts like madmen, intent on showing the might of the Black Shark Gang. "It's time for a massacre," Gane declared arrogantly as he saw the giant turtle Archelon appear before them. Suddenly the sand's surface loosened and began to swallow the beasts, preventing the raiders from advancing. By quick reflex, Gane used his mount as a springboard to leap into the air. Avoiding being buried in the sand, he gaped in surprise, not understanding what was happening beneath his feet. The sand suddenly cracked open. The other raiders weren't so lucky. They were engulfed, began to panic, and shouted for each other to fall back. The entire desert seemed to move, swallowing those who desperately tried to flee. Gane grumbled in frustration at the shifting sand, while Klein anxiously asked about the captain's condition. Gane suspected it was a trap. But Gane insisted there had been no prior sign of anything unusual. At the most chaotic moment, Zeon appeared like a phantom and subdued Gane from behind. The female assassin stood frozen, not realizing when Zeon had gotten close to her. Gane screamed in anger when he saw his close subordinate captured so easily. He demanded Zeon release her at once, but Zeon did not relent. A lightning-quick finishing blow was delivered. Countless sand spikes pierced Gane's body, blood splattering amid the sandstorm. Gawain's gaze trembled with astonishment. He hadn't expected someone who looked frail to act with such cruelty. Zeon wiped the blood from his cheek and said coldly. Next, Masamoto lunged forward immediately to avenge his comrade, his katana slashing hard toward Zeon. The assault split the nearby rock formations in two, the devastation and flying sand obscuring everyone's vision. As the dust slowly cleared, Masamoto began to sweat, not understanding what kind of monster he was facing, because his strongest strike had been blocked easily by Zeon, who stood motionless in the sandstorm with a cold gaze that made his opponent tremble. Watching from afar, Gane shouted Masamoto's name in fear. Gane yelled for Masamoto to look down at his feet immediately. But it was too late. Beneath him were countless sand spears ready to lunge up and strike. In panic, Masamoto could only unleash a flurry of strikes at the sand spears. Hoping to preserve his life, Gane grew furious. Convinced Zeon was using cheap tricks, he charged at Zeon and launched a barrage of attacks. Gawain's punch was stopped by a wall of sand conjured by Zeon. The sand exploded again, blocking the battlefield's view for everyone. Gane snorted, still unwilling to believe that this sand-manipulating ability could be so strong. He thought that a single punch would be enough to break up this annoying mass of sand. A crimson mana flow began to concentrate in Gawain's fist. He wanted to crush Zeon right there. His power was enough to blow away the layer of sand pinning his hand. Gane immediately ordered Masamoto to coordinate the attack with him, but his voice grew smaller and finally fell silent as he saw what had happened. Masamoto had been taken down by Zeon amid the blinding sandstorm. Zeon stared at Gane, the last survivor. A flicker of hesitation crossed his mind after killing. From atop the turtle, Dordan spoke up, aiming to erase the last traces of weakness in his pupil. He called it plainly. Zeon feared killing more than he feared the enemy before him. Pabilsa looked down at the battlefield and declared that those raiders did not deserve to be called human. Zeon listened in silence to the two old men's harsh but practical words. Dordan recounted the crimes of the Black Shark Gang. They tortured and killed people for amusement. They took pride in humiliating women and slaughtering children. Over 200 people had died at their hands. Zeon looked down at the red pool of blood at his feet. His expression changed completely, becoming cold and indifferent. He acknowledged that these raiders could not be considered human. Gawain went mad with rage at the insult. The red mana around him flared even more violently. He gritted his teeth, called Zeon a bastard, and swore to tear him to pieces. Across from him, Zeon unleashed his strongest attack, compressed sand missiles fired in high pressure. Countless sand missiles raced straight at Gawain's position, but unfortunately this assault seemed ineffective. Gane quickly used his superpower to create a defensive barrier, shielding his body from the blasts. After withstanding the assault, Gane arrogantly shouted, "You think this nonsense can defeat me? Really stupid." Believing Zeon's power meant nothing compared to his, he vowed not to let Zeon die easily, but to cut his body into pieces to feed the desert beasts. He swore to make Zeon watch his loved ones being devoured by monsters, forcing him to beg to die in agony. But contrary to that ferocity, Zeon remained calm. He asked coldly, "Is that your dying wish?" Gane froze for a moment. The fury in his eyes blazed more intensely than ever. In the distance, Dordan watched the battle with an enigmatic smile. He seemed very pleased with his student's change. Zeon gripped the hilt of his sword. His golden eyes, now free of hesitation, shone with nothing but contempt for the pirate before him. Thank you all for supporting my video. I wish you endless happiness and joy in life. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like and leave a comment to show your support. I sincerely appreciate it.